race for Charleston County Council's District 3 seat, which covers North Charleston and Mount Pleasant, is heating up. Today, I talk one-on-one with Democratic candidate Rob Wehrman for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Rob Wehrman, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks for having me, Quintin. Always a pleasure.
I appreciate it greatly. I know that obviously it's 23 days left before the election. Who is Rob Wehrman as a Democratic candidate for Charleston County Council's District 3 seat?
Well, right now I am energized. I'm engaged. We are calling folks, trying to connect with people as much as we can under the circumstances, given that it's not necessarily the easiest situation to try and meet folks and literally press the flesh, as you would say. But we're definitely trying to connect with folks where they are, doing a lot of events, doing a lot of interviews. And again, doing a lot of calls to try and reach out on an individual level to meet voters. Personally, it's an exciting time. It's a fun time, and I'm just looking forward to continuing to do this over the next couple weeks, and hopefully getting to see some great results on election night.
How are you engaging with people right now?
Well, like I said, we're doing a number of different things. I think that the thing that we're kind of focused on and really most proud of is the idea that we still need, despite the fact that traditional canvassing and traditional meetups are maybe not appropriate, but we still need to give folks an opportunity to directly connect with the people who are trying to represent them. So that's why, I am calling, we have volunteers calling, and we're trying to connect with as many people as we can that way. Obviously, if someone wanted to reach out to me directly, you can also do that through our website. I'll just plug that, robforcharlestoncounty.com. You could email me there or on our Facebook, which is at Rob for Charleston County.
And, a lot of municipalities have strong relationships with different local governments over the years. What's your relationship right now with the residents of District 3?
Well, I think my relationship is a good one. Again, I think that one thing you can look at is how you campaign. It's going to say a lot about how you are as a leader, if you are in office. So that's why I'm really proud of our efforts to make those direct connections, to reach out to people on an individual basis and try and hear their concerns directly from them. I think I've through this process and even before, I've gotten to know a lot of community leaders as well, who are obviously another important piece of the puzzle. But again, I think direct connection with your constituents is sometimes the best way to go forward, and that's what we're trying to build here today.
What are the concerns for the constituents of District 3?
Well, they vary. I mean, District 3, as you know, is a wide-ranging, somewhat oddly shaped district that goes all the way from Brickyard in Mount Pleasant up to Deer Park in North Charleston. There's a lot of different folks with a lot of different concerns along the way. We do cover sort of the Rivers Avenue corridor, nearby 26. That is obviously an area that is facing a lot of changes, some of them good and some of them that we need to manage in the form of low country rapid transit and the development that is moving up the peninsula and slowly up into North Charleston. But I hear all types of concerns. I mean, some folks are worried about transportation. Some folks are worried about affordable housing. Some folks are worried about flooding. Those are issues we've talked about a lot in this campaign. Some folks are worried about, making sure that they have just the basic services, feeling that their neighborhoods are not always given priority in the county's, distribution of services. I mean, there are folks who are still waiting on a library up here in North Charleston. So that's not in my district, but I've certainly heard from folks about it. And, I think that overall we just want to make sure that all communities are prioritized, that no one is given preferential treatment and no one is left behind.
And you talk about flooding. Let me talk to you about the FEMA flood maps. And this is an article coming from WCSC. Charleston County Council passed the third and final reading to approve new FEMA flood maps. The vote took place Tuesday evening and was unanimous. Officials said these new flood maps are set to go into effect in January 2021, the first update since 2004. According to the county's Building Services Director, that is, there are more than
80,000 buildings that have a new flood zone destination. Despite conventional thinking that more properties may shift to a higher risk category, officials say the maps are actually showing the flood risk is decreasing. Rob, let me ask you this. Where is the flood risk decreasing in District 3?
Well, I think that we've seen some decreased flood risk in Park Circle, where I am locally, which is obviously a good thing. But and obviously, I think it's a relief that we're not seeing drastic increases in the risk of flooding throughout the county. I don't think that means that we can take our eye off the ball, though. I think that we certainly need to continue to be finding funding and investments and regulatory ways to improve our flood management, our stormwater management, because the seawaters aren't going to stop rising. The climate is changing. We've seen increased flooding events in Charleston a lot over the last few years, and as the county continues to grow, it's going to push up against some of those limits, and so that's going to be something we need to continue to manage. So while it is great that these updated FEMA maps did not cause a lot of the devastation that some people thought they might by basically saying everyone is actually in a huge flood zone. I do think that it's still going to be an issue that we're going to have to grapple with going forward.
In those regulatory ways, that is, which one of those ways are ideal right now?
Well, one thing that I think is a policy that the city of Charleston has adopted that I would like to see expanded is some of the development incentives for using green infrastructure. Green infrastructure, forgive me if I've talked to you about it before, but that would be basically using sort of building techniques or materials that would allow more stormwater to be processed on a site rather than sending it into an off-site system where it's either running onto other sites or even just going into the stormwater systems that we have and overburdening them. So these green infrastructure techniques can be encouraged by giving certain density bonuses to developers or construction companies that would want to use them. Basically, if you were willing to implement those practices and procedures in your development, then you would be given the ability to maybe build a little bit bigger. Now, obviously, this is something that has to be done appropriately, and you wouldn't want to necessarily build the most dense possible thing in every area. But again, the idea is that you can allow that type of density because it's not being used as a way to exacerbate flooding problems, because that developer has really committed to making sure that those stormwater issues are taken care of on site and aren't sort of burdening neighbors or the public infrastructure system in any way.
And those stormwater systems that have been overburdened, where exactly are they in District 3?
Well, I think I will tell you that, right here in Park Circle, we have drainage issues. Just outside of my street, drains will get filled up. I think that they're all over. I think some of the most dramatic stormwater issues are not necessarily in District 3. I think some of the most dramatic examples you see maybe downtown. Again, though, I think flooding is an issue that we do have to look at on a regional and county-wide basis, because frankly, if those pressures push people out of downtown, well, they might be coming to District 3 and they might be moving into other districts and causing a need for more infrastructure and more housing, and really just making us spend more later when if we can tackle this problem and make sure that those flooding issues that maybe are more dramatic in downtown and in West Ashley and in Johns Island. Nevertheless, I think that even District 3 residents have an interest in solving those issues, because I think that if people are being displaced from there, well, then it's going to cause more headaches all over our county and all over our region.
And the article goes on to say this at the end of it. It says officials say residents are seeing a reduction in base flood elevation throughout the county. Where exactly are you seeing that in District 3?
Again, I believe there are some areas here in North Charleston that have seen that. Like I said, I'm not specifically familiar with that article, but just from personal experience in talking to folks, I think I have heard that some folks flood insurance and flood zoning designations might be receiving a little relief on that. And again, I think that's great, and it's obviously good that we're not facing some sort of catastrophic situation. But again, we do need to continue to focus on the issue of flooding.
And so you obviously live in Park Circle and you know District 3. What exactly is the quality of life right now there?
Well, like we talked about when we talk about the interests of the residents, I think that the quality of life varies. I think that there is a very high quality of life for a lot of people, but I think that some folks and some residents feel they've been left behind on certain issues, and I certainly think there's room for improvement. I think that improved public transit, improved roads, improved transportation generally are something that people want to see for their quality of life, and becomes more than a quality of life issue, becomes sort of an economic opportunity issue in a lot of cases. I do think that there are folks who are feeling the pressures of high housing prices. I've certainly talked with folks who are concerned about their neighborhoods, their communities being displaced. I know plenty of young folks and young families, even who are living in areas you wouldn't think of as being economically disadvantaged, who are saying, well, look, this is strapping our family budget here that we're spending so much on housing. So I think that the quality of life is good for a lot of people, but really needs improvement for a lot of others. And I think we could see improvement really for everyone.
What is the typical price for a home in District 3?
Well, again, that's going to vary a lot. I mean, if you're looking in the Park Circle area, again, you're going to see a lot of $300,000 for sale homes.
Sure.
If you're moving, up Rivers Avenue, that price is going to drop significantly. If you're moving out to Mount Pleasant, and some of the areas, again, Brickyard, Sneed Farm, those are going to be much more expensive. So, it's like I said, it's a very diverse district, it's not necessarily about the price point, though. A lot of it is about, the income level that people have.
And what is that income level right now for the average resident in your district?
Well, it is. I don't have district broken down income level information. I do know that what we know is the average income, the median income for folks in Charleston County does not. The 30% of folks are living on incomes that are rent burdened. So whether that means they have a median income and then they're paying about $1,200 in rent, that would be one thing. But if folks are making less than the median income or more than the median income in the area, but are also paying disproportionately more for their housing prices, I mean, that's kind of the statistic that I've been focused on, is that number of folks who, whatever their income level and whatever their housing price level, it's more the mismatch in those two.
And are there any other mismatches right now?
Well, I mean, I think that again, I think housing is our biggest sort of pricing mismatch. Obviously, I think that general quality of life issues or general cost of living issues are affecting folks too. Costs of transportation, costs of groceries and gas and sort of basic necessities are also generally a little bit higher in Charleston than in other parts of our state. Nevertheless, I think that housing remains usually the biggest piece of any family's budget, and so that's the piece that we focused on in this campaign, and that luckily it looks like a lot of people are focusing on now.
You know what? Let me ask you this. Charleston County obviously, council obviously is considering putting a question on the ballot to raise property taxes. Do you support raising property taxes to provide low-income housing in the county?
I do, Quintin, and I'll tell you, the thing is, it sounds a little counterintuitive, but ultimately what we're talking about here is, maybe $8 or $12 on a on $100,000 worth of housing. So if you have $100,000 assessed value in your property, you're going to be paying maybe $8 more, something like that, because of this on a yearly basis. So I think that is a manageable increase, and because we do have so many homes in Charleston, or in Charleston County, I should say, where there are very high values attached to those assessments. I think that this is something that's going to raise a pretty good amount of money. They're estimating about $8 million per year for 20 years. So I think that is worth it. I think that the need has been something that's been building for years and years and years. And it's well overdue that we address that need. We've got to find some sort of funding source, and I think this is the most direct way to approach it. I would also note that the county established an affordable housing task force that recommended a very similar recommendation. So this is not something that's being pulled out of thin air. In fact, that recommendation was made over a year ago. So this is I think a good solution, and I think it is worth the investment. But of course, we've got to make sure that those investments are made smartly and are made in long-term, quality, affordable housing that's going to give us the most bang for our buck, because these are county taxpayer dollars that we're talking about using.
Yes, sir. And let me take you back to Mount Pleasant. Obviously, the big talk around town right now is about Highway 41 and the Phillips community. Recently, the Charleston County Council posted this on their Charleston County government page. It says this: the county's proposed alternative for approving Highway 41 continues a long history. Oh, actually, I think this was coming from the Coastal Conservation League, but and they'll talk about the alternative one too. Let me go to that. Alternative one is in conflict with multiple plans produced by the Charleston County government, the town of Mount Pleasant, and the South Carolina Department of Transportation, as well as a special overlay district where avoiding negative impacts to the state's unique cultural resources, specifically the Phillips and 7 Mile communities, is recommended, giving the significance of their sites. And this is coming from the Coastal Conservation League's page. How many plans are there?
Well, I believe there's 2 major plans being proposed right now. I'm through the environmental process, they come up with a number of different alternatives. The alternatives that we're seeing now is one's called 7A and one's called 1, I believe. Right. Alternative 1 has been selected as the quote unquote preferred alternative. I have heard rumblings that another alternative might be, in the works. Nevertheless, I agree with the Coastal Conservation League on that issue. I mean, I think that running the Highway 41 improvements straight through the Phillips community is really just egregious. I mean, it's just not justifiable. Earlier discussions of the proposals that were moving forward, at one point even suggested that it might be more efficient for traffic to run it around that community. Now, and I think what we're seeing is that some of the newer developments out in that area are pushed back against this idea that they might be burdened with these, these roads. And so ultimately, it's just, well, of course, it's the path of least resistance to put it through the Phillips community, which has less political clout and less resources than a lot of these other neighborhoods. But that, while that might be the path of least resistance, it might technically in some terms be the most efficient. It's not the most moral decision. And it's particularly egregious, like I said, because Phillips, that is not the community that has caused this traffic problem. It is the newer developments out there that are really requiring us to make these investments to serve them. And so I think that, having a historic community like Phillips burden that cost or bear that burden is just not a viable option morally or even from a public policy perspective, in my view.
And I know you said, hey, you demand more than just alternative according to your Facebook page. And I know that also on August 28th, you said this: the county's proposed alternative for approving Highway 41 continues a long history of forcing Black neighborhoods to bear the costs of growth. What is the cost of growth right now?
Well, when I say that, I'm not talking about a specific number. I'm talking, more in terms of, although there would be certain specific numbers attached to You could study over years if you run a highway through a community. You could study how that depresses land values or makes certain uses not doable. But it's more about quality of life, which is a term we use a lot. It's more about saying, look, this is currently, an area where people can build a life for themselves, for their families. They have a tight-knit community. And that gets threatened when you start, putting 5 lanes of highway straight through the middle of the area. And that gets threatened when, in other areas when people are getting displaced, that gets threatened when communities are neglected from investment over years. So that's sort of the long history I've been talking about. The cost of development is again, sort of a reference to the fact that as we grow, we need infrastructure. And where we put that infrastructure and how we choose to make those investments is going to impact the type of growth we get. And so, when you build out infrastructure to make it more feasible to live in these sort of sprawling, built out neighborhoods that are out, further out in Mount Pleasant and even further up into Berkeley County and other areas, look, you're going to get that type of sprawling development. And so folks who had no part of that decision, who were there before all of that happened, I don't think those folks should generally just, have to be the ones who pay for all of that infrastructure, whether it be in terms of actual dollars or in this case, in terms of their quality of life.
And that brings me to my next question, Rob. What is a family supposed to do about both the depreciation of their property and the new increased noise level?
Well, I mean, exactly. I mean, what are they supposed to do? I mean, if it reaches that point, I think we will have already, lost significantly on this issue. That's why I think, we need to do what I think has happened fairly successfully in this case, and I think we might see an altered plan or maybe just hopefully a scrapping of the idea of running this through Phillips in the first place at all. But what we saw was pretty immediate reaction, a pretty immediate organization of the community and of outside organizations around this issue. A lot of folks rallied to the cause basically, within the week after it was announced that this was going to be the preferred alternative. So, I think that's what you can do is you can try and stop it. You can try and make sure that communities are involved, make sure that people are engaged in the issues that are affecting them locally and prevent these types of things from being built. Because, we hear a lot that once you hear about something going up, it's too late. In this case, hopefully that's not going to be the situation. But yeah, I mean, if a highway gets extended and, half of your front yard is now SCDOT or county highway, and you're dealing with that traffic, you're dealing with that noise. I mean, there's not a whole lot to do at that point other than move, which is obviously what we're trying to avoid.
Sure. And let me get over to some other issues because obviously there's a lot of projects going on in your district. And with the COVID situation affecting the local economy so badly, do you know how it has affected sales tax revenues that the county needs to fund projects in your district?
I've taken a look at the budget. It has affected sales tax revenues. I think I couldn't give you the exact numbers, but I think a couple million less in expected revenues over the next, I believe, 2 years are what we're probably going to see. What that means for particular projects is to be determined and potentially to be determined by the council that moves forward in the next budgetary cycle. What that might mean is that certain projects have to be delayed. I mean, ultimately, the transportation sales tax,
right,
it is designed to eventually get to $2.1 billion no matter what. I mean, so it's when we talk about how COVID's affecting that particular stream of revenue, it might be more of a timing issue than it is saying, well, we're now just not going to get that money. I mean, we have dedicated, unless it just takes too long and goes beyond the time span, eventually that money will come in. But you are looking at prioritizing potentially some projects to move forward and some projects not to move forward. And look, I mean, delays on projects like this, we have seen how construction costs can rise. We have seen how issues that haven't been foreseen can pop up. So delays can sometimes mean, additional costs, and maybe somewhere down the line that means certain projects won't get completed. I think in the short term, though, we do have to take a look and see, can we continue to do what we're all trying to do right now? And if not, what's going to have to be put on the back burner for a little bit? And I think we have to recognize that putting things on the back burner puts more risk to those projects than the ones that get to move forward.
And that brings me to my next question. You kind of answered a little bit, but how should the county fund all of the planned projects with diminished revenues?
Well, yeah, again, so I think that, like I said, it's a prioritization question, and it's more about a time prioritization question of saying, look, eventually I think we can't expect that this tax will raise the stated number of 2.1. But if we're not going to have as much of that on the front end as we thought we might, then look, yeah, I mean, it might mean that some projects that we might have expected to come online in 3 years are actually coming online in 4 years, or actually coming online in 5 years. I mean, to the extent that we've got projects that are in the middle or very close to breaking ground, I think those are areas we can prioritize. We've talked a lot about the need for alternatives in our transportation infrastructure. So public transportation, mass transportation, walkable and bikeable neighborhoods. These are things that I would certainly advocate to prioritize if we do find ourselves needing to cut something, or again, cutting might really mean saying, let's see if we can push this back to another year. But nonetheless, the stuff that I would want to see make sure we go forward is the stuff that is going to give us more options to get around the county.
And where is your comprehensive plan for public transportation?
Well, I mean, I think my plan is again, largely outlined on my website, to say, look, we need comprehensive solutions. And that would mean certainly low country rapid transit, the implementation of which is going to be important. And we're going to have to make sure that we stay on that, that we're willing to push that project and make sure that we are making progress. That's why that's one of the things that, if we're saying, well, is this going to go forward or is that going to go forward? I would certainly, top of my list would be low country rapid transit. I think there are other investments. Certainly transportation tax dollars are more generally allocated sort of to local road projects, to public transit, just CARTA generally, your more standard CARTA buses. And then, I think that when we're looking at some of these more major road improvements, like say the airport or like 41, we want to be looking at saying, look, how are these going to connect or affect public transit, and how are these going to be connectable with walkable and bikeable neighborhoods? Are they going to have alternatives for folks to use a bike lane, or to use some sort of sidewalks or some sort of alternative mode of transportation? I think those are ways that we can continue to try and implement that in Charleston County. Of course, we've also got to make some of our bridges a little bit safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. So there's a lot of things, but you asked what's comprehensive, and comprehensive is going to require a lot of different advances in a lot of different areas.
As a matter of fact, let me ask you this. Have you been able to take a survey in your district 3, to see who is in favor of the 526 East expansion and who's not?
No, I haven't taken a formal poll or survey. I've certainly talked with a lot of folks about it. And like in a lot of parts of Charleston County, there are differing opinions. I think there are certainly people who are strongly opposed. There are people who are strongly in favor. And, look, I mean, this district is not in West Ashley, and it's not in Johns Island. And so there are a few people who are maybe a little less engaged in that issue than others. But I think for the most part, people are engaged in that issue. Again, that's going to be another issue where prioritization is going to have to be key, because look, I mean, the fact of the matter is, no one was expecting 526 to be funded by transportation sales tax dollars when that referendum was passed in 2016. As of, I think, 2017, they had plans to allocate those dollars that did not include 526 extension. Obviously, I understand that things have changed. That project, became more feasible and more viable over the last 2 years, and so now they're slated to fund it with those funds. But that's going to mean that some projects are going to be. I mean, I think funding 526 is definitely going to mean that some of the projects that we've talked about are not going to be able to go forward. And whether that means a big named road project or whether that simply means less funding for local municipalities to do their own, regular street paving, less funding for rural roads, less funding for public transportation, some of those more general disbursements, I don't know. What I will say is I don't think that we really can tell what that impact is going to be until we have a really solid understanding of what the costs are going to be. And obviously, the last time we waited a few years to check back in on the price point on that project, it jumped by, over $150 million, I believe. So, if we're currently looking at, I think, $725 for the overall cost, probably $305 for the county's contribution to that. How much is that going to jump due to rising construction costs, due to rising property values, due to rising costs generally? I don't know, but that's something I'd certainly like to see before we start saying, well, we're definitely going to be wiping the slate clean of this project or that project or displacing other funding.
Let me reread that question. Obviously, have you taken a survey in District 3 to see who's still in favor of the 526 widening over here in District 3?
I apologize. I thought you were talking
no
about
worries.
The
worries.
widening, again, no. I mean, I don't have a survey company or anything.
No worries. No worries.
We've talked with folks about that somewhat as well. I mean, I think there is general understanding, again, that we need to improve our transit and transportation infrastructure. I do think that the widening would do that. 526 is pretty backed up in a lot of places in North Charleston at various points of the day. And, the fact of the matter is that we've just got to make sure that we're doing it in a way that's going to have the least impact on communities who have been, impacted by those road projects. And there will ultimately have to be some properties that are purchased to make room for those projects. But I think that in general, people understand the need to build out that transit.
Why should people vote for you?
Well, look, I think that a lot of the issues that we've been talking about, Quintin, are issues that we have seen for a long time in Charleston County. I think that I am offering a vision of how we can move forward on these issues in ways that haven't necessarily been tried, with some new innovative ideas, but also with new energy and new commitment to making sure these things get done. I think, we've seen delays in a lot of projects. We have seen miscues and missteps by certain agencies at the county level before. I think that it is time for fresh energy and fresh ideas. And the other thing I can tell you is, look, I mean, I work as a public defender. I am committed to public service, and particularly committed to public service in a way that isn't going to leave anyone behind. I think that the growing economic inequality in our community is a serious threat. It threatens not only to hurt those who are left behind and displaced by change, but look, it's going to threaten the overall health of our community, because we're only as strong as the people who reside here. I have spent the last few years advocating for folks who don't have the same economic advantages as other people do. That's something that's in my heart. That's something I've chosen to do. And that's something that I would certainly bring to county council. And I think it's something we need right now as we face these challenges, and need to make sure that they are addressed in a way that is going to build a better Charleston County for everyone.
Rob Wehrman, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks, Quintin. I appreciate it.
Thank you.